Hello everybody, it's Sarah, and before I get started with today's video, if you are wondering why there's a bunch of ratty ass socks hanging behind me, the reason for that is that my little sister decided to make me an advent calendar this year, and she made it from her old socks. So yeah, I didn't know where to put it up, so I just put it up on my bookshelf. Actually, this line is made from lights, so I can actually decorate my bookshelf with this one afterwards. However, I don't have batteries yet, so the lights are still turned off. But yeah, if you see them behind me all throughout December, this is why. But that out of the way, today's video is my November wrap-up. So I want to talk to you about all the books that I read in November, of which I actually read quite a few. I read a total of 8 books in November, which is one of my best reading months this year, or has been one of my best reading months this year. Although I have to be honest, part of the reason is last weekend as well as Monday and Tuesday I was sick, so especially Monday and Tuesday I just spent all day reading, and in fact I read almost 1,200 pages on Monday and Tuesday, 800 of which I read on Tuesday alone. So yeah, that's part of the reason how I managed to read more this month. But now that's enough rambling once again for the start of the video. Let's get into the books I read, and as always, starting with rereads. I reread both The Black Coast as well as The Splinter King, so the first 2 books in the God King Chronicles in November. If you remember, in my TBR video I said that I hadn't even started this book yet. This was one of the books that I basically finished just on Tuesday. So yeah, very happy that I managed to do that, because now I have already been able to start the final and 3rd book finally, and I am so excited. But back to my reread, I won't tell you too much of my thoughts of these 2 books because I do have a full spoiler-free review of both books, so I will leave the link down below and up there. But basically what this series is an adult high fantasy series. It's one of those series that really starts with a focus on a few characters and just one setting in the first book, while also already setting up a few other characters and a few other settings in the background, and kind of, you know, setting up the bigger picture. That bigger picture, those other characters, are what we mostly get to see then in the 2nd book, with the focus characters of the first book kind of taking a bit of a back seat. However, in terms of plot, I will just quickly tell you where we start in the first book. In the first book, the setting mostly is Black Keep, which is kind of this town, village, that over years and years and years has regularly been visited, I want to say, by raiders. And those raiders obviously pillaged the village, pillaged the town, killed people. And so yeah, when once again the horns are blown that raiders are being sighted again, the town basically gets ready to die, because they haven't had a great time in the past few years. However, when the raiders arrive, it seems like they have come in peace. They have come, in fact, to settle, and that is kind of the starting point of the book. Will they manage to settle? Will their history of bloodshed and, you know, anonymity prevent them from kind of finding peaceful solutions, and so on? And also, why have the raiders suddenly come to settle? What have they run from? That's kind of the setup of the first book. And I have to be honest, the one thing I want to say in terms of reread, something that I also did say in my review, is that I enjoyed the 2nd book less than the first book, mostly because I fell in love with the central characters of the first book. I especially fell in love with our 2 kind of main characters, definitely the 2 characters that get the most POV chapters, Sana and Daimon, and I very much missed them in the 2nd book. They have chapters, but they are in no way a focus of book 2, and so when I read it for the first time, there was just this little, you know, tiny part of me that was disappointed that I didn't get to see their story continue, at least not as much as I wanted to see it continue. However, now being prepared on reread what I was going to get in the 2nd book, I definitely was able to enjoy it more, and I definitely was able to enjoy the other side characters more as well. even though I do still miss Sana and Daimon, and I hope I'll get more from them in the third book. So yeah, definitely enjoyed this one on a reread more, the first one as well. I still enjoy the first one more than the second one, but you know, it's just a great series. I loved my reread, and moving on now because I've been talking long enough about this series. So all the rest of the books that I am going to talk about today were books that I read for the first time, and as usual, I will talk about them in order of enjoyment. So starting with the one I enjoyed the least, which was definitely Gideon the Ninth, which is the first book in the Locked Tomb series by Tamsin Muir. And this one was the buddy read for my book club of Queens, Witches and Valkyries, and that book club is all about reading adult high fantasy written by women and genderqueer folks. I still say adult high fantasy. It's actually adult fantasy written by women and genderqueer folks. And yeah, in December we're currently reading Kaikei, so if you're interested in joining us, I will leave the links to the Twitter and the Discord down below. So Gideon the Ninth technically is sci-fi, it's set in space. However, there's necromancy here and there's magic here, and it's one of those books that definitely, you know, belongs under the term of fantasy in space. So that's why I also read it, or I also chose it for the book club. And yeah, I mean, to be honest, before I picked this up, I didn't have the biggest interest in reading this. I just didn't know which other books to put on the poll for October, I think it was. And then I put this on there because I wanted to have some books that had some like spooky vibes, and this is like kind of a haunted house and necromancy in space. And then it got runner-up in October, and I always put the runner-up on the poll for the next month. And so yeah, that's how we ended up reading it, not necessarily by my choice or because I would have chosen it on my own, but because the book club chose it. So yeah, what is this about? As I said, it's kind of a haunted house mystery in space. It's also often marketed with the tagline lesbian necromancers in space, which I guess kind of fits. And so in this first book we follow Gideon, who has grown up as part of the Ninth. Basically you have these different planets, I guess. I don't know. I'm still a little bit confused about this series, to be honest, and how the world building works and so on. Also partially because I just wasn't interested enough, and I guess I could have read the glossary at the end, but I just refused to read glossaries. So yeah, there's these things called houses. Gideon is part of the Ninth house. She is mistreated by the heir to the Ninth house, who is Harrow. And Harrow, however, one day comes to her and demands that Gideon join her in going to this other place. And when they arrive there, they realize that there's gonna be a competition to become this thing, which is called Lycor, which we for a very long time don't really find out, in my opinion, what that exactly is and what that exactly means. However, we want to become this thing. Gideon needs to help Harrow, and there's also like people from the other houses there. However, then people slowly start dying and everyone's like, oh shit. So yeah, that's the very confusing basic gist of what this story is about. I literally can't explain it any better. It's a bunch of people going there. They go there for a competition. People start dying. It's basically that. And yeah, so why did I not enjoy this? On the one hand, I will talk more about this, by the way. I do intend to continue on with this series. So I won't do a review just of the first book. I will probably try and do a review once the series is finished, should I finish the series. If not, I will do a review up to whichever book I read and then talk about why I didn't continue on with the series. But reasons why I did not like the series. First of all, I just didn't vibe with Gideon. Gideon just felt like this very forcefully smart-ass character to me. And for me, smart-ass characters can be very hit or miss. Like, if they are side characters, I can like them if I like their humor. I didn't like Gideon's humor. If they're main characters and also if they're main side characters, the thing that I like about smartass characters is if they have some like really tragic backstory and they're basically smartass because, you know, they hide this big darkness behind them. Yeah, Gideon is not really like that. Like, she has a somewhat tragic backstory, but she's just a smartass. Like, she's not a smartass to hide anything. She's not the type of character that then stops being a smartass and everyone's like, oh shit, they stopped being funny, like shit is going down. Wasn't really that vibe as well. I just didn't vibe with Gideon. She is a badass, I have to admit that. Didn't vibe with her still. And then when you have one central POV character for a story and you don't care about that character, it just kind of makes it hard to care about the story. And this story had so fucking many characters that were so quickly introduced to us that I instantly just lost sight of who was who. And also because I didn't care about Gideon, I didn't care enough to, you know, try and understand who was who. So throughout most of the book I was just like, yeah, I'm reading this, I guess. So yeah, that was kind of my vibe with this book. Although, to be honest, I have heard that most people don't understand what's going on when reading this book for the first time, so I don't seem to be alone with that. However, the last chapter, mostly the epilogue, really got me interested in continuing on with Gideon the Ninth at least, so I will probably do that. So the next book is one that I will have a full review for, so I won't talk about this one too long. It's an Incarnation of Shadow and Light by S.A. Christensen. I was sent this by the author in return for an honest review, so that will come in the future. I just still have to get around to it. Gonna do it still in December though. This is also self-pub, which I don't know why self-pub books are always so fucking heavy, but this book is really heavy. So this is a new adult high fantasy. In this one we follow this kingdom where there's always a few people who have magic. They're known as the Incarnate, and the Incarnate basically are revered. They are the leaders of this kingdom. Now, two of the four characters that we follow are Gabriel and Zoe. They are the current incarnates of this kingdom. As such, they are poised to be king and queen after the previous king and queen have been killed. However, on the day of the coronation, a guy appears, Nicholas. He is the missing prince from another kingdom, and he is like, hey guys, I'm also an incarnate and I challenge you to the title of king, which he does, and a fight ensues. Nicholas is the third one of our POV characters, and the fourth and last one of our POV characters is then a guard who finally demands that she is do her due. Is that how you say it? I think that's how you say it. And so basically the story is kind of the power struggle between those four characters and just following them as they try to, you know, get what is owed to them, basically, or what they think is owed to them. So what did I think about the story? I gave it 3.5 stars in total. I actually really enjoyed it. It was a really, you know, light, fun read. As I said, I don't want to talk too much about it right now because I will have a full review, but I definitely think this is one of those stories that I think is a good book if you want to start getting into high fantasy, because, you know, it's not too complex and yet you still have interesting and engaging characters with interesting motivations. The next book I have is The Widow Queen by Elżbieta Czeresinska. This is a historical fantasy, using the term historical fantasy kind of loosely, that was translated from Polish. I also won't talk about this too much because I do want to have a full review of this one as well. In this one we follow Sviatoslava, probably butchered this name, but this is as close as I can get to pronouncing it right now, who is a princess. And her father is basically the Duke, the first king of Poland. He is quite a well-known figure from Polish history. Sviatoslava also was a historical figure. However, like according to the author's note at the end, she kind of just appeared in the biographies of a lot of big kings around that time, from England, from Sweden, from Denmark, but she's never really talked about in depth that much, and so the author set out to kind of write a fictional biography of this person, of this princess, who is Sviatoslava, who, as I said, is the daughter of this Polish king, and she's basically the apple of his eye. She's his favorite daughter. However, as a daughter, this is set in the 10th century, at the end of the 10th century, it is her duty to be married, and her father wants her to marry someone that will bring him a good alliance, because her father has quite a few, you know, ambitions in terms of countries or, you know, counties that he wants to rule. And so, yeah, Sviatoslava is sent to be married off, but she is not happy with, like, you know, not taking her fate into her own hands a little bit as well. And we just kind of follow her story from there. As I said, it's kind of a fictionalized biography. I overall really enjoyed this. Again, I will have a full review of this up. I think it's probably a book where it's good to at least know some of the names that appear in this story, like, you know, some of the big Viking kings, a little bit of Polish history. It's good to know some of that, at least, I think, before diving in here. Although, even though I'm not at all well-versed in the time of history, in that part of European history, I still found this book really engaging and really interesting, and Sviatoslava a really interesting character, and I definitely want to continue on with the series. Next is a book I will not try to summarize, because it's a sequel, and I have completely forgotten what the plot in the first book was. Like, I'm not even kidding. I'm not even kidding. I have completely forgotten the plot. But the book I'm talking about is Successors Promised by Trudy Canavan, which is the third book in the Millennium's Rule series. This series was the one I pulled from my series TBR jar for November. It's the second book that I finished on Monday and Tuesday in 2 days. And I think, honestly, in this series, I'm enjoying each book more and more. Like, I gave this, I think, 3.75 stars, which, to be honest, I think I actually gave The Widow Queen more than I gave this. However, I read The Widow Queen over such a long period of time, and this is fresher on my mind, so it feels to me like I enjoyed this one more. Anyway, this is a quartet in total, so I still have one book left in the series. And in the series we follow two characters. The only thing I can tell you in terms of the first book is that one of the characters we follow is a magician who finds a book, and the, like, soul or the memories of a woman were bound into that book by, like, an old evil magician. And so he tries to go on a journey to find out how he can, you know, remove the memories from this book and give this woman a body back. And the second character that we follow is a character from a world where magic doesn't really exist. There isn't a lot of magic, and if people can do magic, like, only very specific people are allowed to do magic. However, when it is discovered that she can do magic, well, shit goes down. Let's say it like that. That's the basic gist of the first book, and then every book afterwards kind of very much has its own plot. Like, it's almost every book is kind of finished already again by the end of the book. And I have to be honest, this third book is the one that I definitely enjoyed the most. Like, our male character Tyan, I just really enjoy his character arc. He's the type of character that actually works a lot for the evil guys and for the villains in this book, because it's like, well, I don't know what else to do, and this is kind of, you know, the path of least resistance, but also in a way, you know, it's how I can see, like, I don't like what they're doing, but if I work for them, I can kind of at least, you know, keep an eye on them a little bit. And I can maybe just a little bit try and stop them from doing what they're doing. It's that kind of vibe. So I really like tie-in. I really enjoy the series. I now have already ordered the 4th book, so I can't wait to finish this series, and once I do, I will try to have a review up. And then the book I absolutely adored the most in November is a book that I actually have already filmed a review for. It's just not uploaded yet, and that is Juniper and Thorne by Ava Reid, which is Ava Reid's 2nd book after The Wolf and the Woodsman. It's set in the same world as The Wolf and the Woodsman, but has absolutely nothing to do with Ava Reid's 1st book. I don't even think it's set at the same time, even remotely at the same time. And the main setting of the story is Oblia, which is a city that used to have a lot of magic, but now is getting more and more industrial. And so there's only one last wizard left in the city, and that is our main character Marlinchen's father. He kind of keeps Marlinchen and her 2 older sisters locked up. However, every now and again, especially the 2 older sisters, sneak out at night, and one time when Marlinchen joins them, they go and watch a ballet. So they watch a ballet performance at the local ballet theater, and there Marlinchen becomes absolutely infatuated with the main dancer, and so after that sneaks out a few times more to meet up with him, and the story kind of gets started from there. There's also a mystery with a monster killing people in the background, and yeah, it's a gorgeous book. It's so well written. Ava Reid's writing has improved like 150% from her 1st book, and if you have seen my review of The Wolf and the Woodsman, you will know that I already enjoyed Ava Reid's writing a lot in the 1st book, and yet she still improved so much. I love Marlinchen as a character. She is one of the very few characters out there who has gone through a lot of trauma and yet is still very kind and has a lot of naivete to her, even though she has seen so many horrible things or has gone through so many horrible things. So I just find her very interesting as a character, and just in general the look at trauma and at family trauma, like family as the perpetrator of trauma, is just something that I very much enjoyed in this book, so I can highly recommend it. Before you pick it up though, I would recommend looking up trigger warnings, because there's quite a few of those in here. Yes, hello, before I say goodbye. It's Sarah from literally 5 minutes after I turned off the camera, not even 5 seconds, 2 seconds, after I turned off the camera and put away my books, and also my battery is flashing, so I need to be quick about this. I realized I forgot about a book, and this is why I don't like ebooks usually, because I just forget about them when I want to talk about them. But there was one more book I read in November, and that was Dark Mind by Val Neal. I was given an arc of this by the author. I was so excited that I got one, because the previous book of this, the 1st book, which was Dark Apprentice, was one of my favorite books of last year. So I was so excited to get an arc of Dark Mind. I really enjoyed this book. This book follows Nikolai and Medea. Medea is autistic. She is also an immortal witch who used to take on a lot of apprentices. However, since most of those apprentices only come to her to learn how to be immortal, and most people who want to be immortal are people who are interested in the dark magics, those apprentices sooner or later tried to kill her. However, she ended up killing them. Since then, she has decided to never take on an apprentice again. Then comes Nikolai, who is a psychopath, who also wants to become the most powerful magician, dark magician ever. And he tries to convince Medea to take him on as an apprentice. And yeah, that's basically the 1st book. The 1st book is seeing whether Medea takes on Nikolai as an apprentice or not. Well, the beginning of the first book, at least, that is. And so yeah, I really enjoyed the first book already. I also really enjoyed the second book. I will have a full review of it, so I once again will keep it short, aside from my battery flashing. But yeah, I really enjoyed the second book as well. I really enjoyed, you know, how the dynamic evolved between Medea and Nikolai. I still find Nikolai uncomfortable as fuck to be in the head of, but, you know, in a good way, as in he's really well written. I just don't like him. I genuinely don't like him. We get to see a bit more of the world in this one, so I thought that was exciting. We get to see a few more magi or magicians, so really like that as well. And there's some new mysteries going on, and yeah, I overall really enjoyed it. Can't wait for the actual book to be released so y'all can read it, although I think it'll be until spring next year until that happens, so it's quite a while off yet. And yeah, so now back to outro Sarah. So that was it for my very long reading wrap up. If you have read any of the books that I talked about, tell me your thoughts on them in the comments down below. And if you're interested in picking up any of the books, tell me that in the comments down below as well. If you enjoyed this video, maybe think about giving me a thumbs up and also maybe subscribing. All the links to my social media as well as to my book club, as I said, are linked down below, so go and check those out. And I hope I'll see you very soon. Bye!